Hello everyone and welcome back. We are right here right now, part 8 and the last. And all I have to say is wow. I was so emotional after this one because first off, it was my first screener. So I remember watching the finale and I was really sad because it was perfect, but I was also really sad because like the end, it just felt like limitless possibilities. So before I even get into it, thank you so much for your engagement, and because of you, I honestly had the most wonderful experience watching this the first time, and I actually had to put it away for a bit, and I came back to it again this weekend because otherwise I just would have watched it a million times, but it just felt so special, and I was just, so yeah, thank you for making me an emotional wreck. And the theme here, or the conclusion we can kind of draw is, sometimes we miss out on things that are right in front of us, right? Like we're so busy chasing the next best thing or the next best relationship that we often just kind of neglect literally the blessings that we already have, the people we already have, or the opportunities that we have that we kind of, unfortunately, there is a tendency to magnify all the things we don't have and minimize all the things we do have. And this ending couldn't have been more perfect. And I love the way the episode started. So we see Kate in the boat. And this is a nice contrast because we started with Fraser plugged in and now we're looking at Kate plugged in. And she's sitting in the boat and she's looking up at the sky, and wow, what a difference time makes, right? Like the Kate we saw at the beginning of the series to the end. And I've said this before, like although we've kind of jumped a lot, I feel their growth. I don't think, like I really feel like this is a totally different person at the end. And Kate's family is moving, so it seems like Sarah just, did the deed, and we kind of knew this was coming, but it kind of makes this whole scene even more emotional because this is the last time Kate will be staring up at the sky. You know how much she loves this boat. Like she's gone on trips with her father on this boat. This is where she was chilling with Fraser. And I love this scene of her kind of moving through the town, right? Like she's looking at everything in these freeze frames. And these are just memories, right? Like these are scenes and people that she's seen a million times before. But this is the last time. Like she's not going to be seeing these people ever again. And she's picking up the dominoes and she's looking around one last time like, damn, I can't believe time really flies. And she picks up these boxes and she's on her way home. And just before she goes home, she kind of stares at Fraser's house. And I guess we're to understand that prior to this concert, her and Fraser, I guess, hadn't talked in a bit. And that could be due to whatever it is Sarah did, because we don't know the time period between the funeral and their departure. And I really enjoyed the contrast, right? Like you kind of see Kate's house before and now you see it after, right? Everything's wrapped in boxes. And it's really funny because she goes into the house and it's their last night in Italy, and of course they're having dominoes. And that's a bit of a joke, right? Like it's an American company and you're in Italy, like you couldn't have had better pizza. And everybody in the house is kind of fighting, but from what it seems like, they're kind of more or less a family. And they're having all these arguments. You can kind of hear that Jenny's like super excited to go back to Chicago. She was excited about that. Like this is like, she's talked about Chicago before. So she's just hoping they stay there as long as possible. There's also like whispers about possibly going to Okinawa. Like that could be his next station. And Danny and them are kind of fighting. And the only reason Kate gets out of it is because she has to clear her closet. She goes to her room and you hear all this yelling, and you kind of hear a conversation between Danny and Richard, and Richard's like, we have to go home to Chicago and wait for the order. And Danny's like, your life is about waiting. My life isn't about waiting. Like, you can wait all day, but I need to be who I want to be now. And again, you have so many different personalities in this house, but this was appropriate foreshadowing, right? Like, if you wait forever, or if you wait for people forever, like Richard is somebody who waits and kind of does as he's told, whereas Danny and Kate are kind of the opposite, right? Like, or at least they're becoming individuals that kind of go after what they want instead of waiting around for somebody to kind of like order things for them. She goes to her room. She kind of overhears the whole family yelling. She's kind of packing, but she's in no rush, right? Like she kind of seems over it. And Britney comes over. And this was so interesting because this is probably the last time she's going to see Britney. Britney kind of makes the point of saying, so have you talked to Fraser? Indicating that again, maybe Caitlin and Fraser hadn't talked in a bit. And also, I think Britney, this is kind of a sad end for Britney because she lost to Fraser. She's kind of, we find out that actually she's been in love with Caitlin. She's like, well, it's always been you. I've loved you. And this is sad because if you remember at the start of the episode, like Britney and Kate were best friends. Like they were doing everything together. They seemed so in sync, at least for the most part. And now, like, God, how time changes. And Fraser is her new best friend, right? Fraser is her soulmate. And there is a bit of a sting, right? and she kind of kisses her, and they're kind of looking at each other, forming these memories, because that's what this whole episode is about, right? Like kind of taking these memories and hopefully they live on, hopefully they live on. And Britney, again, she came over as a last goodbye, but it does add a different dimension knowing that she was in love with her. Like, how did you kind of interpret that? Did you think that she loved her as a friend? Because the way Caitlyn kind of sidetracks her, she's like, I like you as a friend. And that was really awkward, like I like you, just not like that. But again, I think Britney really, like just on a very deep level, cared for Caitlyn. And it was obvious, she was always kind of watching out for her. She was always just kind of asking her questions, like if you need anything, if you need to talk. Like she's that friend that makes it known that she cares. And Kate is an introvert, right? Like you don't know what's going on with her. She just kind of does her own thing. But Britney has made it known time and time again that like, I'll be here for you. Sadly, Caitlyn has never taken the offer, right? And now they're kind of looking at each other wondering, like, what happened to us? Like, how did we go from the beginning of the series to now, right? It's almost like they're acquaintances. They're no longer, they're barely friends, let alone best friends. And sadly, more likely than not, they probably won't keep in touch once Caitlyn leaves for America. And again, like they play with time in the show quite a bit, and even in this episode. So I'm not sure when Britney left, but all we know is that Caitlyn woke up to a text. And she's taking a nap, and I guess she just wakes up again. We're not really sure what the time period is, and it's a text basically notifying her of an event. So Bologna, Blood Orange is today. And if you recall, this was the concert that Fraser was trying to book when Caitlyn was trying to prepare for that date, and she was just really annoyed with him. And this is the episode where he's like, this is not what I had in mind for you. How are we gonna get to Bologna? Like, she wasn't that interested in this concert, and plus this isn't really her type of music. But anyways, he booked it, and today's the day, right? Like, it's happening, the concert is here. And at first she's annoyed, right? She's like, I don't wanna, first it seems like she doesn't wanna see him. And second, this isn't her type of music, so she kind of goes over to the blinds. And I love this little sequence, this back and forth. She kind of closes it, she opens it again, and it sees like checkpoint now. Like Fraser can sense, they can really sense each other, right? Like he knows that, I don't know if you've ever had a friend where like you have a falling out, but you can kind of feel them around. I don't know how to describe it. Like they have such a deep friendship that even if they ignore each other, they're aware, or they're kind of looking like, is that person there? Like you're just hyper aware of when they're there and when they're not there. Anyway, they go to the checkpoint, and it seems like all is well, right? Like this will be their final night on the town. And at first they kind of walk towards each other, and then they run because it's like, okay, I guess we're doing this. And it's exciting, right? Like they get on their last bus trip and they're looking at each other, smiling. They haven't said a word because it's happening. And they finally make it over to the train station. And mind you, they don't know how they're going to get to Bologna, right? Like that was the crux of that episode where Caitlyn was like, how the hell are we supposed to get there? And I guess they're just going to have to figure it out. So they're counting their change. And this is kind of like, it's kind of cute, right? Because they just kind of ran out of their house. They're not really prepared. You've had months to prepare for this, but again, this is not something she was anticipating. And they're trying to take out all their change. And Kate kind of makes the point of saying, this time tomorrow, like I'll be so far away from here. So kind of like YOLO, you only live once, let's just do it. And thankfully for Fraser, like Caitlyn knows where she's going and she speaks Italian, because she kind of says, we have to jump this train, we have to do this. Like, don't worry about it. And they get on the train and they find a window seat, and they're excited, right? Because it's happening. They're no longer stuck there, and this concert is becoming more real. And they kind of plug in and they play this song, Time Will Tell. And this song has been playing throughout this series. If this show had a theme song, it would be Time Will Tell. And this is the first time we're hearing them mouth it out, right? Like, time will tell if you can figure this and work it out. No one's waiting on you anymore, so don't be stressed out. Even if it's something that you've had your eye on. It is what it is. And this song is so appropriate because think about how long it takes to prepare for a concert. Like, think about how, you choose outfits, you buy the ticket, you're not even sure it's worth the price. Then you have to get there, and it's this whole ordeal. And once you get there, it's over in like an hour, if that. You know what I mean? But what do you get out of it? Memories, right? Like you get these memories, and the minute you're in the concert, you're like, thank God I came. But everything prior to that is just like hell on earth. And up until this point, we've seen kind of Kate rush herself, and although we've seen her change quite a bit, she's still unsure, right? And the whole point of this song and the whole point of the series is, you know, it is what it is. Like, even if you don't go to this concert, or if you do go to this concert, I think sometimes we have this fear of missing out. And this is, a lot of it has to do with chasing the next big thing. And we don't realize, it's like, okay, the concert will go on, the show will go on, and there's other opportunities, right? Like, you're never really missing out. And that's kind of the point of the song. Like, take your time, you'll find your people, everything will work out exactly as it should. And just be in the present, because the past is gone, right? And I really enjoyed them mouthing it out. And this song, I have to tell you, like, grew on me. I used to think it was so cringe, and it's a very Fraser song. And again, this is not Caitlin's style of music, but I guess it's now all their styles of music. So they're on this train, mouthing this song, and while all this is happening, you know, the ticket, I guess, authorities kind of come through. And again, I guess they hopped this train, like they didn't have enough cash to kind of go. And I really love the sense of urgency in this, because you see Caitlin kind of transforming into Harper, and meanwhile Fraser is banging on the door like they have all the time in the world, and this Italian dude is not having it. But all this to say, the most touching sort of part, or one of the most, like, this show has a lot of subtle moments that I appreciate, but this was one of them. So she's kind of transforming into Harper, and at the same time, like, trying to escape the authorities, who know damn well that there's somebody in this bathroom because he was banging loudly on the door. And she's kind of like, Fraser's trying to help her, like, kind of hurry up, and so they can kind of jump this train. And Caitlin says something really interesting. She says, "Do you like me like this?" And he's like, "Maybe." And she's like, "Do you like me as a man? Like, do you like me as a boy?" And he's like, "Well, it depends. Like, are you still the same person?" And she kind of gives him this look of death. Like, this is, everybody's been asking her this question, right? Like, are you still the same person? And the fact that she asked this question, like, do you like me as a man? Up until this point, and correct me if I'm wrong, I really assumed that everything she was doing, like, this is her image, and that she thought very strongly about this image. But I guess by saying this, like, she kind of wants to impress Fraser, right? Like, a lot of her ideas of what it means to be an attractive male, or what it means to look good, is like kind of motivated by, okay, well, maybe he'll like me, maybe. And this is not something we've seen in Kate, because she's never really asked anybody's opinion, right? Like, Fraser kind of gave her the clothes, but she never asked for the clothes. She never asked for his opinion on style or anything like this. But I guess she'd been taking it seriously. And at the end of the day, I guess we can only judge ourselves through the eyes of others, in part, right? Like, that's where a lot of our opinions of ourselves sadly comes from. And Kate really surprised me with the statement, because I didn't think she cared. But the fact that she was like, "Do you like me like this, like as a man?" suggests that maybe a part of her motivation in terms of, like, being Harper and kind of really owning this sense of style is to impress people, and specifically to impress Fraser. So I thought that was some pretty impressive foreshadowing. Anyways, their time is cut short, and they have to jump the train. And this ticket authority guy, like, that has to be the worst job, because I can't imagine how many people kind of jump the train or jump a bus. Anyways, they kind of run off into the street, and they're excited they got away, but they're stranded, right? Like, again, they have no plan. They don't know where they're going. They don't know why they're going. I mean, they know why they're going, but they're kind of walking, you know, endlessly. And I have to say, before I go further, like, this show is so beautifully shot. Like, I don't think Luca Guadagnino knows, like, what he's done here, because as just a piece of art, it's just stunning to look at. Like, when they're walking through the fog, and you can kind of see the lights, and he doesn't waste a scene. Like, every scene is so beautifully shot, and it's so chill, and it's so cinematic, and it really raised the bar just for television. And I really had to appreciate it. Anyways, they're stranded, they're walking, and of course, when you're walking alone with your best friend, things come out, right? Like, the truth comes out, and Caitlin is getting phone calls from her father, right? Like, she was supposed to be picking out window seats, and now they're texting her, like, "Where are you? Like, we're leaving tomorrow," right? Like, this is the day of the concert is the night before she's supposed to leave. Like, that's my understanding. And they're kind of stressed. But of course, Fraser, like, nobody calls him. Nobody looks out for him. And that's always been something that at first I didn't notice, but later on I'm like, you know, it would be nice to get a call. Like, Fraser just, and his explanation is, my mom basically pretends like she doesn't know what he's doing as reparations. And he also suggests that they've gone to enough bases. Like, his mother is pretty high up, so we have to assume that they've moved around a lot. And it seems like perhaps Sarah has this habit of kind of controlling Fraser by taking away his friends or moving families that kind of... So I don't know, you guys let me know if that's what you got out of it, but it seems like this wasn't just about Richard. This was also maybe about Sarah kind of getting Fraser back on her side, which is not something I thought about until Fraser said it, and he was like, I hate her with every bone in my body. And he said it with such disinterest that you have to believe him. They're talking, and Caitlin kind of brings up the fact that, so is that why you hate your mother, right? Like, is it because she kind of moves around your best friends, or she kind of does this thing? Is that what happened with Mark? And if you remember Mark is this person that he'd been kind of phantom calling, I guess, in the first 2 episodes. Like, he'd been grieving New York. We didn't know who Mark was, but we just knew that this was somebody that Fraser felt attached to. We're not sure if this was a boyfriend or a crush or what. And then he kind of drops it on us that Mark was not real. Essentially, Mark is somebody who he found attractive, and he kind of imagined going up to him, and not only that, like the smart guy being super ecstatic that he went up to him. And unfortunately, one day, I guess he had overheard this Mark saying that he saw Fraser staring at him, and he thought he was a lunatic, and it just kind of broke his heart, right? And this story about Mark, I think really, like, I was so taken aback by it, because it never occurred to me that Mark wasn't real. And if you recall, Fraser is not somebody who's into fast feelings, right? Like, I think he's a believer in love and love at first sight. Like, he might not say it, but I feel like this might be it. And I think we've all had crushes, right? We've all had people that we've kind of imagined talking to, and like, how they're going to react, and everything's going to be so chill and calm. And in reality, who knows? Maybe you have nothing in common with that person. Maybe that person's a creep. Like, maybe the smart guy was, you dodged a bullet. But it's heartbreaking, right? Because when you're a kid and you put somebody on a pedestal, like even as an adult, right? And then you kind of overhear that person saying something negative about you, it's heartbreaking. Like, it's really sad. And he kind of felt like, you can see him breaking down in this little scene that he has where he's like, he's trying to keep it together, like, and I'm like, wow. And it took a degree of vulnerability for Fraser to say that, and I feel like we haven't seen that vulnerability from him. Like, we've seen a lot from Caitlin in more ways than one, but Fraser hasn't been 100%, forthcoming about his time in New York. Like, we don't know much about his time in New York, and he doesn't want to talk about it. He's never brought it up, and he really kind of keeps it to himself. But this story was really heartbreaking, and the other reason this Mark story is so mind-blowing is it explains his alienation with community. Because I remember there was a conversation between him and Caitlin, and he was kind of saying, how do you think everybody sees us? And Caitlin was like, oh, they just assume we're dating. And Fraser says something like, oh, I think they think we're freaks, or like they think we're weird. And it explains why maybe he's been hesitant to befriend anybody, because he kind of has this negative perception of how other people see him based on this Mark guy. And I think that's true for a lot of people, right? Like, you're always worried that people think of you negatively, when in fact, 90% of the time, no one is thinking about you at all. But, it's like, it's probably not this negative. So this Mark incident really traumatized him and kind of affected him coming here, because now it's like, oh, that's how people see me. Like, then what's the use in trying? So that was interesting. It added a whole new dimension, and it kind of explains, I'm not going to say his antisocial behavior, but just his reluctance to kind of befriend anybody outside of Caitlin, or just kind of act indifferent. But he's actually not indifferent, like, he cares quite a bit. I think it's one thing to feel like rejected. It's another thing for somebody to make you feel crazy or unworthy of love, right? And that's maybe how this Mark guy made him feel. And Caitlin kind of gets up and says, okay, well, it is what it is. Like, Craig is not real. Mark is not real. We're not real. What's like, who really cares at the end of the day? And Fraser's like, yeah, we don't. And that was such an appropriate response. Like, honestly, like, when she said, okay, he doesn't exist, I feel like that first okay was like, because I was like kind of shocked. I was like, whoa, interesting. But I guess, what can you do, right? It's just, at the time, sometimes we go through things that are very painful, especially the way he was describing this Mark. Like, you could tell it stung, like, it really affected his being. But at the end of the day, you move on, right? Like, these things, what's that saying? Time heals all wounds. Like, looking back on it, he's probably like, I can't believe I ever felt this way. But at the time, it hurt like hell, right? Anyway, so they managed to keep walking, and they find this gas station, and they're able to get a ride. Like, the stars kind of align. believably so, right? Like, they have to get to this concert. That's all we know. So one way or another, they're going to get there, and they get in this car, and so much is happening in this car, right? So we find out that Kate's family has only been there for 3 years, or less than 3 years, because I guess every family has to be on the base for 3 years and they get moved. But I remember mentioning in past videos that it felt like, although Fraser and Sarah and Maggie have been here for like months and months, it feels like they just got here yesterday. And so when Caitlin said, oh, her family had, like, you basically have a maximum of 3 years and they're leaving early, it feels like Richard and his family have been there for years, right? And it feels like they're really part of this community, and that's how easily they were able to kind of fit in with everybody. So that kind of took me back. I was like, really? Like, you were there for that short of a period of time? Anyways, Caitlin thankfully speaks Italian, so she's able to small talk. But sadly for Caitlin, Fraser meets this bestie, this soulmate, this guy. So this was kind of like heartbreaking also for Caitlin. I felt her pain a bit. So they get in the car, and Fraser automatically befriends this young boy, and they have the same taste in music and the same sense of style, because Fraser wears a lot of like very expensive clothing, and they're very niche. And you know, he says it's not about the money, it's about like the art and all this stuff, but you have to have the money to buy the art. And this kid is admiring him. He's like, oh my God, that's a piece from blah, blah, blah. And this is this and that. And Fraser's like, oh my God, how do you know? And Kate, like, you can look at her face the whole time. She's just like is anyone going to talk to me? And it's really interesting because after that conversation she had about, do you like me as a man? Like, Kate acts so unbothered that you wonder, right? And this episode, she was really bothered, right? Like, we start to see like, oh, so you do care what Fraser thinks. Like, oh, okay, interesting. And they're talking about the concert, right? Like, they're talking about the different songs they love off the album and all these things. And, you know, he kind of makes the point of saying, I like Hands Clap. Like, they're naming other songs off the album. And then Caitlin's like, yeah, we like Time Will Tell. And then the kid is like, that's overplayed. That's the song basically everybody goes to, you know, just to hear, like, I don't know, do you know those friends that just go to concerts to hear that one song? Like, at the encore, everybody knows the words, but aside from that, like, nobody knows any of the lyrics. So he basically shaded her and said, you're not really a fan. And she's just like, and honestly, she's like, yeah, I mean, you're not wrong, but also, fuck you, like, this is my time. Anyways, they get to the concert, and before I start, everything about this concert is perfection. Like, this is probably the way he captured the atmosphere from beginning to end, right? Like, they get out of the car and they're running in, and there's this excitement, everybody's already in. And so they get into the concert, and automatically I have to say, the way Luca shot this was just magnificent. This felt like a concert. It felt like we were in the room with them. And I miss concerts, right? Like, I haven't been to a concert in over a year. Actually, no, I went to a concert in February. This was before coronavirus, and see, I can't even tell time anymore, but the atmosphere was so accurate, right? Like, you get in, you can kind of feel everybody's bodies against each other. The atmosphere, like the fogginess, just the lights of that kind of fluorescent lighting that kind of hits everybody the wrong way until the show starts and it goes down, and they're trying to find their place, and they're all trying to figure things out. And this just felt so authentic, and this must have taken a long time to do, because a large part of the reason I love this finale is this sequence with this concert, because it feels like you're at a concert. Like, it literally feels like we're watching a live performance, and we're in the room, and everybody's just chilling and having a good time. And again, like, you think about concerts, right? Like, you're all there for the same reason. You're there to have a good time, right? Like, you're there for community, you're there to make memories. Again, who knows, like, the amount of drama it took to get there. Everybody has a story, but we all got here, and we're all gonna have a good time, and it's just so exciting. So Fraser and his friend kind of push up to the front. The show's about to start, and Caitlin's like, wait for me, like, what the hell are you doing? Like, she feels kind of abandoned, like, you really gonna just like go up to the front without me? Like, what? And again, it's all about finding your place, right? And anybody's gone to a concert with friends or a festival with friends, like, you know, right? Like, there's those friends that have to be at the front. There are those friends that kind of have to wander and go around, but everybody has their own adventure, right? Like, at the end of the night, you were all there to have a good time, and 9 times out of 10, everybody had a good time. They just had a different story to tell. And that's what happens here, right? Like, Caitlin is just like, I don't know what to do anymore, and she stands back, right? She goes to the bar, but she has to figure out what she's gonna do and how she's gonna do it. And okay, once this concert starts, I think because Fraser has been hyping us up so much, Like, we were excited. Like, I didn't even know why I was excited. I was smiling ear to ear watching this. And he, you know, that beat drops, the lights turn off, and it's so accurate, right? Like, you feel like, oh, it's happening, like it's starting. Like, we've been waiting months, and it's like, it's real. Like, I felt like I was, anyways. So, you know, it drops and it goes on, and you really feel his excitement. And there's a bit where he kind of like puts him on his shoulder, and he's like, oh my God, the artist saw me. And, you know, it's just, everything about Fraser's reaction is so accurate. You know, there's always that like moment where you're like, oh my God, he looked at me. Like, he was singing to me, and it's like he was singing to everyone. Like, but you know, like, it's still exciting, and he's having his beer, and Fraser's having the best time ever. And meanwhile, Caitlin found a friend, right? So Caitlin is in the back. She's kind of given up on Fraser, and you know, Fraser's up there having the time of his life, and she kind of stands back and she has a beer. And thankfully, this bartender was really attractive. She kind of looked at Caitlin like, hey, what's up? Like, it's all good, like what's going on? And Caitlin is, you know, she feels like Harper now. She's like, okay, cool, like this is actually happening. And you know, she's in no rush, right? She's chilling, she's relaxing, she's enjoying the atmosphere, and she has a swag. Like, Harper really has a swag. Like, you guys let me know. Like, she has the orange sweater on, like everything is just, you know, perfection. And as the night goes on, like song after song plays, and it felt so chill. Like, this whole sequence just felt like so relaxed. And I'm like, damn, like I miss concerts. And there's a bit where as time is slow, or time is kind of speeding up and the night is coming to an end, this kid that Fraser is with like takes out his phone. And that's the one thing I will say about Fraser. Like, he didn't have his phone out the entire time, which is super impressive for a kid his age. Anyways, this kid is like, don't you have anybody you want to share this to? Because he's kind of videotaping this one song that I guess is like one of their known songs. And Fraser's looking back, and this time finally he's looking, like, where's Caitlin? You know what I mean? Like, he kind of wants to share this with her, because again, this is supposed to be their memory. This is supposed to be their last night together. But again, God makes plans. What is that saying? Like, we make plans, but God laughs. And this, regardless, they all had a good time, right? So Fraser's looking around, but at the same time, he kind of wants to push to the front. So there's that tension, that push-pull that's been like kind of killing him all along. And God, luck would have it, right? So Caitlin, it's towards the end of the night, this bartender is like, are you gonna ask me out? Like, are you gonna ask what time I finish? And Harper's like, no, because I'm not. But she's like, yeah, like, of course. And this bartender like grabs her hand and drags her through the crowd, and they go backstage to meet this band. And I loved it. Like, I love this whole like bit where she's taking her through the crowd. And, you know, she couldn't get through the crowd on her own, right? But this bartender is able to kind of push her through, and they go backstage. And she's so cool, right? Like, Harper is so cool about it. She kind of goes back there, and she's like, hey guys, like, what's up? Like, this is not a backstage pass I asked for. This is a concert I barely wanted to come to. But it's cool when you're there. Again, like, imagine the amount of work that goes into going to these concerts. And then once you're there, you're like, I'm so glad I went. And it's really funny because before Harper walks in, you see them talking, right? Like, they're talking about food. And the lead singer's like, we're in Italy. I'm sick of hotel food. I don't really want to be doing this. Like, you know, can we have fresh fettuccine or something like this? And this is in such stark contrast to the Domino's pizza that Caitlin's family was about to eat on their last night in Italy, a last night that she's no longer sharing with them because she's here. Anyways, all this to say, she comes in, she takes her selfie, and the way the lead singer looked at her, like, and I think the lead singer kind of saw something in Caitlin, and he you know what was cool was that he didn't say anything, right? Because the bartender says something later, but he was cool, he took the picture, and then he asks, like, what's your favorite song, right? So from your lips to God's ears, and Kate says, time will tell. And he's like, okay, cool, like, thanks. And it's that thanks that's like, okay, you and everybody else, right? Like, nobody ever names something obscure. So he goes, and I thought that was the chillest scene. Like, it was just so, it felt like she was really backstage. And I think it makes it even cooler that they're a band. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, I enjoyed this whole sequence, and it was just wow, right? And she's excited, and she's like, oh my God. And the bartender's kind of giving her eyes, right? She's like looking at her like she's in love with Harper, like, oh my God. And then the beat drops. And as soon as the song starts playing, so the song starts playing, time will tell, you know, the piano hits, like, everything's happening. And Fraser made his way to the front, right? Like, he's quite literally sitting on stage. And he looks up at this lead singer like he won the lottery. Like he looks up at him like the sea has been parted, like life is good. And honestly, I was excited. I was like, oh my God, it's happening. Like the song is dropping. And sometimes you'll go to concerts and they don't play your favorite song. You know what I mean? Like I remember seeing Coldplay and they didn't play Talk. And I think Talk is like their GOAT song. Anyways, but he got his song. You know what I mean? He got like that moment. And I was singing along. I was like, time will tell, you know. It's so much less whiny in person. Anyways, like and I really loved how Caitlyn was running, right? Like she was really excited, not to hear the song, but to see Fraser. Like that's, if you go to concerts with people or if you go to these social events, which is what I miss, you go to see other people's reactions, right? Like, yeah, you're there to see them, but it's more like the social interaction. And there's just something so cool about everybody kind of being in the same room to have a good time. And she kind of goes out there and she's super excited to see Fraser, and he's kind of like, he looks like he's on the verge of tears, like he just saw, you know, Jesus or something. Like he just looks like and she can see him, right? She can see him, but he can't see her. And she's so excited. She's smiling ear to ear. And this is the most excitement we've seen from Caitlyn in a long time. And she was genuinely happy that she could make Fraser's night because she knows how important this is to him. She knows, honestly, he's been listening to every version of this damn song since the beginning of time. And so the fact that it's here is like, and she goes backstage and she's like, oh my God, he's gonna kill me. Like I got a selfie. And she's not like, again, it's not really her type of music, but the selfie is more for him, right? Like it's more to create these memories. Like, remember that time we went to a concert and I got to talk to them and you basically like, yeah, missed out because you abandoned me to go to the front. Do you remember that? Yeah, because I remember that. Anyways, so she's excited. And then all her excitement just drops, right? And this bartender is like, they make out. And Caitlyn makes out with her eyes open, which I think is super. I was like, close your eyes. It's weird. Like, and that goes for all of you. Like, do not make out with your eyes open. It scares your partners. But anyways, so everything's all well and good. This is the second makeout she's had in 48 hours. Like, she's just killing it as Harper. And then the bartender says, you're FGM, like female, or FTM, female transgender male. And Caitlyn's like, I don't know what I am. Like, and she's like, no, you're transgender. Like that's what the term is. That's what the official term is. And this just kind of breaks her, right? Like she goes from kind of, like she's had this nervous energy throughout and now it's just gone, right? And if you remember, like Sarah wanted to take her to the therapist. Like everybody's been trying to label her. And a lot of the reason she goes out as Harper is not to be Caitlyn, right? Like just so she can kind of be who she wants to be or kind of explore who it is she wants to be. And it's nice feeling invisible, right? It's nice feeling like, you know, people see you exactly as you want to see them. But even on that date, right? Like when that girl told her, like, how did you do this with the beard? Like it broke her because she's like, she put a lot of time into this. She put a lot of effort into this. So for someone to just kind of either label you or just kind of dismiss it like, oh, how did you do this? I think a lot of her frustration is the fact that no one will let her communicate who she is. Instead, everybody is trying to communicate it for her. And she's just trying to live in the moment, right? Like that's the one thing Caitlyn has been very good at. It's just she knows what she feels and that's it. And that's a very unusual way of being in this time, in this day and age. So she kind of bolts and this concert goes from the best thing ever to the worst thing ever. And this scene where it's kind of upside down was phenomenal. Like and that's the whole point, right? Like everybody's in sync, everybody's clapping, everybody's having the best time of their lives. And Caitlyn is not in sync with anybody. She's been pulled out. So now she feels alienated from her body and she feels alienated from the crowd, from like society in this moment because, you know, she wipes the beard off. She's crying, like she's kind of done. Like, why did I come here? And she feels herself, right? Like she feels this outer body experience. And now she's, you know, she just feels drained, I think, at the end of the day, and she leaves. And she runs off and she's texting Fraser and you can hear the song is still playing, right? So she runs out of there. She's like, I have to catch the train. My flight is tomorrow. And it is tomorrow. Like she shouldn't even be at this concert. She has to go home and that is legitimate. And she goes home and she's like, I have to make the train that's at midnight or something like this. And she just bolts. And this scene of Caitlyn walking, when you see all the tapestries and everything, is really stunning, right? Like again, this show does not waste a scene, it does not waste a moment. And she gets there and Fraser is still enjoying his concert. He's like, this is the best thing ever. Like I am having a great time. And he gets out of there, and his best friend forever, you know, like his new best friend, like he pops a beer, like he's still chilling, thinking like I don't know what's wrong with her, like I don't know why she's doing this, I don't know why she's being this way. And so he's just like, F it, I'm just gonna hang out with this boy. And they have a kiss. So Fraser's been talking about kissing basically this whole season. You know, like I think at the start of the season they said, well, we're not gonna kiss. Like him and Caitlyn were saying, we're never gonna kiss. But of course that changes anyways. So he goes with this boy and they have a kiss. And, you know, there's no sparks, right? Like there's no energy. You know, like I guess they'll just be friends. But the biggest thing that he got out of this was this little boy, this little friend of his, kind of takes him to one of the most beautiful places in Italy and says, this view is amazing and we should basically kiss up there. And then like lightning strikes Fraser. He's like, wait a minute. Like I have an idea. Because the night is coming to an end. They're running out of time. This is the last time he could possibly see his best friend. And suddenly like everything makes sense to him, right? And he runs. And I love this scene of this boy just like disappearing, because it's like a phantom, right? Like you've done your job, goodbye. And he runs, and as we know, Fraser is not the athletic type. So him running was not something we see, and he's like really huffing, right? Like he's really like pushing, and because he knows that this is the last time he could see Caitlyn. Like he's running out of time, right? So he's pushing and he's running to the train station. He can't read Italian, and this Italian guy's like, just go that way, platform 1. Like he's trying to speak English to help this boy because he seems lost. And this whole scene of him convincing Caitlyn to get off the train was so exciting. Like the music is playing, you don't know what they're saying. We're not really sure what he said to her. And I think the reason Caitlyn got off the train is because this is what she wanted from him. Because again, he kind of neglects her at this concert. They didn't get to see their favorite song together after rehearsing, right? Like they've been rehearsing, like mouthing all these words, and he just kind of ditches her for some random. So I think seeing that kind of energy from him, she was like, okay, like it's good to know you care. And he grabs her and they run, one final run. And of course, he takes her to the most beautiful place on earth to have the most perfect, most beautiful kiss anybody could possibly have. And the lead up to this kiss was wonderful, right? Like they're tired, they're panting. I don't know how Fraser ran for so long. Like I was like, bravo. And they're looking at each other, right? Like Fraser kind of makes a move, which is unusual for him. And they're touching each other's hair, and like it's happening, right? And they kiss. And it was that kiss where you're like so happy to kiss them, right? Like they wanted to eat each other up, and there was such synchronicity between them. And they're so happy. And I love the close-up shots of them kissing and then the faraway shots of them kissing. And then it ends with this song saying like, desperate is the day that is tomorrow. Because again, this is her last night. So I'm assuming that run at the end is to make sure she catches her flight. But everything made sense, right? Like sometimes we miss out on people that's right in front of us. And the show starts off like kind of gray and dreary, and it ends with clear skies and kind of limitless possibilities. So this is not the end, right? But actually the beginning of a bright, beautiful future. And that's what I got out of it. Overall, I thought it was amazing. That concert sequence was probably one of the best I've seen. It felt like we were actually at a concert, and it was such an appropriate ending to the show. And I don't think we get shows like this often, and I'm really sad that a lot more people didn't get on this. And again, the show's about community and just kind of finding your place in it. And for those, you know, the pacing of the show and everything like this just really speaks to the fact that the most dramatic moments or the most, you know, our best memories come from like everyday settings, right? Like they don't happen in these grandiose ways. And just looking at Caitlyn and Fraser together, it's really interesting because you take Caitlyn, for example, Caitlyn and Harper, like this character development was fantastic. And just to kind of end with my final thoughts on them, I'm going to steal a quote from like Yoga with Adrienne, and she says like, find what feels good. And find what feels good doesn't mean like do whatever you want. It just means you really have to take time to sit with yourself and figure out what makes you feel good. And sometimes that might not be the most social thing. Sometimes that might not be, you know, it might be a bit isolating, but this is what will attract people to you and energy and kind of the things you want. And I really enjoy Caitlyn. And by the end of it, actually, I wanted to call her Harper, because Caitlyn is someone who only knows what she feels, and she's been very true to that. And she has resisted letting other people kind of put her in a box. And so I really enjoyed her strength in this, and it was fantastic. And Fraser particularly really touched me in a lot of ways because he's new. He's a kid that's used to moving around a lot, and I'm an adult and I'm just now recently moving, and I felt that alienation, right? Like, you know, I'm someone who, like, when you're at home, and I'm generalizing, but it's hard enough to find community at home, but when you're abroad and you're in an environment where you don't really have familiarity with everything, just as Fraser does with the space and the people around him, it's kind of scary because you get into this thinking where, why don't I naturally click with people? Like, why don't I fit with people? So when he met Caitlin, I can understand why he attached to her, because it gets harder and harder to find that one person you just click with. And sometimes you might not find that person for a very long time. And so this whole Fraser and Mark situation, I think we can all relate to, because we've all had those moments where you've been with a group of people, or you feel like, am I crazy? Are they crazy? Like, why don't I fit in? And especially moving around this much, like, I've had to start over like a bit now, and it's hard, right? Because you're trying to make new friends and you're like, do I be myself? Do I have to be this exaggerated version of myself? So I appreciate Fraser's kind of, you know, his guts to really kind of go after Caitlin and befriend her. So overall, this was a beautiful series. I think this finale especially said a lot about kind of going after what you want and just not being too rushed, right? Like, time will tell. Like, at the end of the day, things will work out how they're supposed to work out. There's no missing out, right? Like, this fear of missing out, this thing where we have to go to this trip, or, you know, sometimes you'll meet a new group of people and you're like, okay, I have to see them again the next week, or maybe they'll think this and that. Or like, sometimes we overthink what people think when 90% of the time no one is actually thinking about us. And it's never that serious, right? And I guess the whole point of the show is just to really show, like, hey, in the end, you have time, you'll find your people. Just, if something doesn't feel good, don't do it. If it feels good, go with it. But, you know, don't stress yourself out, right? Like, don't be stressed out. It is what it is. And yeah, just really sit with yourself. And this is the hard work, right? Like, finding what feels good is the hard work. It's really kind of knowing yourself and accepting it, and not trying to, you know what, there are people you're not going to click with and there are people you are going to click with. And sometimes there's more of one group than the other. But, you know, there's only one you at the end of the day. And I'll leave you with that thought. So thank you for tuning in. Recently, I've been getting a lot more comments, so a lot of my silent viewers have been like chiming in. So, you know, it makes a world of difference. I felt kind of like hyped doing this review. I was like, okay, I really got to kill it. But it's really nice that, you know, you're all watching and you're all kind of getting the same things that I'm getting out of it, because we rarely get a show like this or shows like this. And if we do, nobody ever talks about them or finds them worthy enough to talk about. They just kind of slip under the radar. And again, the only people I know watching the show is you guys. So thank you. This has been an emotional journey. This is my first, and it's been something else. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your energy. Thank you just for your honesty and your willingness to open up and your vulnerability. And I don't know what to say, you know, like I felt some type of way then and I feel some type of way now. So it's been wonderful. It's been beautiful. Thank you. Let me know what your thoughts on the finale was. Let me know what your thoughts on this like concert sequence was. Let me know what your thoughts on the song was. Like, did it grow on you? Is it nails on a chalkboard for you? Let me know. Okay. And until we see each other again next time, ciao, Bellas. See, I tried to do that, but it didn't really work.